2 days before the wedding, I slid open the closet and stared into the soft mouth of my garment bag. It sagged like a deflated balloon, the zipper gaping wide, utterly empty. For a split second, my brain scrambled to make sense of it. Maybe I'd double-bagged the dress for extra protection, or perhaps I'd absent-mindedly moved it to the hall rack during one of my frantic packing sessions. But no, the faint cedar smell from the wooden hangers and the thin whisper of leftover tool dust scattered on the shelf told the undeniable truth: my wedding dress wasn't there. The house suddenly felt oppressively loud, the fridge humming like a distant beehive, the pipes ticking away in the walls like a countdown clock, while my chest went perfectly silent, as if my heart had forgotten how to beat. My phone buzzed sharply against the dresser, jolting me back. I grabbed it, and before I could even say hello, a bright, cheerful voice chimed in. "Hi, Emily. Congratulations on the big day." It was the bridal salon. "Just calling to confirm your successful pickup this morning. We hope you love the final press, we steamed it to perfection." I sat down so fast on the bed that the frame let out a protesting squeak. "What, pickup?" I managed to stammer. "I didn't pick anything up." There was a rustle of papers on her end, like she was flipping through a file. "Oh, our system shows the gown was released under your name at 10:42 a.m. today. Everything looked good on our end." My mouth filled with that dry, metallic taste that panic brings, like biting down on a penny. "That's not possible. I'm at home right now. I never came in." There was a small, awkward pause, the kind that stretches just long enough to make your skin crawl. "Sometimes a friend or family member collects on behalf of the bride," the woman offered, her tone smoothing out into that polished customer service calm, the one they train for handling meltdowns. "We have a signed release with your surname right here. It happens all the time, especially with busy brides." I pressed 2 fingertips to my temple, trying to steady the spinning in my head. "I didn't authorize anyone. Can you email me whatever you have, the release form, the timestamp, anything?" Another rustle, quicker this time. "Of course. I'll send the confirmation right now. We're so sorry for the confusion." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Please don't be sorry. Just send it." I hung up and realized my hands were shaking uncontrollably, like leaves in a storm. The kettle on the stove shrieked suddenly, piercing the air. It must have been boiling for what felt like hours, forgotten in my earlier distraction. I fumbled with the knob to turn it off, my fingers slipping twice before it silenced. That's when Jake came in, barefoot and casual, his tie draped loosely around his neck like he was midway through getting ready for a casual lunch. He blinked at me, concern etching lines on his forehead. "Hey. You okay?" he asked, and then he really saw my face, the pale shock, the wide eyes. "What happened?" I heard my own voice come out thin and reedy, like it belonged to someone else. "They say I picked up the dress. Today. At 10:42. He frowned, tilting his head. "But you've been here all morning. I made you pancakes at 10:42, remember? You were laughing about the lumpy batter." I nodded numbly. "Exactly. Could your mom have," he started, trailing off as he saw the doubt in my eyes. I shook my head firmly. "No. She's with Aunt Carol at the florist, picking up the boutonnieres. And she wouldn't sign for me without telling me first, she's too straightforward for that." He rubbed my shoulder gently, his touch warm and grounding. "Maybe it's just a paperwork glitch. Some mix-up in their system. Call them back, or we can drive down there together. We'll fix it." I wanted so badly to believe him, to step into that alternate version of the day where this was nothing more than a silly clerical blip, a story we'd laugh about later over champagne. Instead, I opened the group chat, the one with my bridesmaids, my mom, the wedding planner, and scrolled frantically for any mention of pickups, schedules, or favors I might have asked and forgotten in the whirlwind of planning. Nothing. Just 100 exclamation points about the centerpieces looking divine and a silly meme about disastrous seating charts that had us all giggling last week. The email landed in my inbox with a cheerful ping that felt mocking in the moment. Subject: final pickup confirmation, Emily Hartwell. I tapped it open with a trembling finger. A PDF filled the screen, my order number, the gown model with its intricate lace details, the line released to Emily Hartwell, and below it, a looping, confident signature that looked nothing like mine, too bold, too flourished. My name, though, spelled perfectly, down to the capital H in Hartwell. There was even a printed note from the associate, verified at counter. Bride's representative confirmed. My stomach turned over, a wave of nausea hitting me. I whispered to the empty room, "That's not my signature." Jake peered over my shoulder, his breath warm on my neck. "It doesn't even look close, yours is more elegant, less showy." I called the salon back immediately, my heart pounding. "The signature on that form isn't mine," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my tone, though it crept in anyway. "Who signed it? Did you check an ID? Anything?" The manager came on the line after a brief hold, her voice firm but not unkind, like she'd handled crises like this before. "We followed our usual release procedure." The individual presented details matching the order, your full name, the fitting dates, even the alteration notes. "We are investigating internally and reviewing our security cameras. It does show as a legitimate pickup under your account." I closed my eyes, squeezing them shut against the rising tide of fear. "Please check quickly. My wedding is in 48 hours, I need that dress." She softened a bit, her tone shifting to empathy. "We will. I'll call you as soon as I have anything concrete." After I hung up, the house seemed to shrink around me, every object suddenly suspect in its eerie stillness, the clock on the wall ticking too loudly, the sunlight slanting through the blinds like accusatory fingers. I walked back to the closet and pressed my palm flat against the empty garment bag, the way you might touch a faded photograph of someone long gone, hoping to feel their presence. Did I mess up? Did I tell someone they could grab it for me? I muttered to myself, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. My calendar on the wall fluttered in the draft from the air conditioner, a bright green square boldly outlining Saturday, 4 p.m., our ceremony time. I traced it with my finger, as if that simple act could anchor me back to reality, could make everything snap back into place. "You didn't authorize anyone," I told myself out loud, needing to hear a voice, any voice, insist on that one piece of certainty amid the chaos. But the small, humiliating thought crept in anyway, slithering into my mind like a shadow. What if I was the problem? Had I signed something absent-mindedly at my last fitting and forgotten in the haze of excitement? Had I posted a pickup time on Instagram where anyone could see it, buried in a story about my bridal glow-up? I scrolled through my social media stories, latte art from my favorite cafe, 3 perfect peonies in a vintage jar, a close-up of my sparkling shoes waiting for the big day. No timestamps, no salon tags, nothing that screamed vulnerability. Just 1,000 hearts and, so excited, replies from friends and followers. Yet, I felt watched anyway, like invisible eyes were tracking my every move. Who would even know enough to walk into that salon and drop your order number without raising alarms? Jake asked, his question hanging between us like a taut wire, vibrating with unspoken implications. I could list exactly one person who knew my timeline down to the minute, who had insisted on handling vendor calls from the start, who kept spreadsheets and backup spreadsheets of every tiny detail, color-coded and meticulously organized. Someone who'd been there since before there were vendors and spreadsheets, back when we were just 2 girls passing crumpled notes in 10th grade about prom dresses, dream colleges, and the boys who made our hearts flutter. I didn't say her name out loud yet. I just felt the sharp outline of it, like a puzzle piece that suddenly fit too perfectly. I picked up my phone again, my thumb hovering over the contact pinned at the top of my favorites list, the one labeled with a heart emoji. If there was anyone who would know how this could have happened, anyone who would swear up and down that she had a plan to fix it, it was the person I'd always called my person. The thought steadied me just enough to take a deep breath. Before I dialed, I let the history of us rush back in like a warm flood, endless sleepovers on carpeted floors with popcorn kernels stuck in our hair, whispered promises under blankets to stand beside each other in white one day, her voice cutting through my tears after a bad day, saying, "Don't worry, Em, I've got you." Always. Those memories wrapped around me like a safety net. I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat. Then I pressed call. When she picked up, her voice was warm, almost too warm, like honey poured a little too thick over something bitter. What's up, bride-to-be, she sang out, and for a heartbeat, I almost convinced myself that everything would be fine, that she'd burst into laughter and tell me some ridiculous mix-up had happened, like the time we accidentally swapped backpacks in high school and she ended up with my math homework. But instead of blurting out the nightmare about the missing gown, I hesitated, remembering the way we'd always shared everything, no secrets, no judgments. Madison Reed wasn't just a bridesmaid in my lineup. She was the friend, the one who knew exactly which oversized sweater I'd cried into after my first brutal breakup in college, the one who got suspended right alongside me in 11th grade because we ditched school to chase a indie band across town in her beat-up Honda. She was supposed to be my anchor, the steady force in the chaos of life. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Maddie, the salon says someone picked up my dress this morning. Under my name. The silence on her end stretched too long, like a rubber band pulled taut, and then she let out a laugh that was just a shade too bright, too forced. What? That's insane. They probably messed up the paperwork again. Remember when they lost the sash during your second fitting? God, what a disaster that was. We had to hunt it down in their storage room. Her tone wrapped the problem in glitter and bows, like a party favor you weren't supposed to open too carefully, lest you see the cheap plastic inside. But my stomach tightened into a knot. It wasn't the same as losing a sash. That had been a minor hiccup, fixed with a quick call. This felt like a deliberate tear in the fabric of my reality. Our friendship had been built on these unspoken roles, me, a little more cautious, always overthinking every decision, and her, the bold girl who took the wheel when no one else wanted to drive, charging ahead with confidence that bordered on recklessness. She'd always insisted on being the planner, the fixer, the one who swooped in before things could break. When I got engaged to Jake last year, she practically begged me over brunch, her eyes wide and earnest, "Please, let me be your maid of honor. Nobody knows you better than I do, no one else could make this perfect for you." I hadn't fought her on it. Back then, it felt like fate, like the natural progression of our unbreakable bond. She sent me Google Docs filled with vendor recommendations, dragged me through endless cake tastings until we found the perfect vanilla lavender flavor, even corrected the florist when I was too shy to point out the wrong shade of peonies. It felt like care, like love poured into action. Lately, though, it had started to feel like control, like she was directing a play where I was the star but she held the script. Now, listening to her brush off the salon's so-called mistake with that airy dismissal, that control revealed its sharp teeth. "I'll handle it," she said suddenly, cutting me off mid-sentence as I tried to explain the forged signature. "Don't stress, Em. You should be focused on writing those vows and, like, moisturizing your skin for that bridal glow. Leave the boring logistics to me, I live for this stuff." Her words were smooth as silk, but underneath I caught the subtle note of possession, like the wedding was hers to manage, not mine to live and breathe. My throat closed up, making it hard to swallow. I looked around my kitchen, my gaze landing on the piles of mason jars she'd insisted we use for the centerpieces, rustic chic, she'd called them, the hand-lettered place cards she had made herself, sitting in neat stacks on my counter, her elegant script mocking me now. Everywhere, her fingerprints, her decision stamped onto my day. I remembered her wide smile when she'd said, months ago, "You don't even have to think about a thing, I'll make sure everything's perfect, down to the last petal." Back then, I'd thought it was generosity, a gift from my best friend. Now, my mind replayed the salon's successful pickup email and that forged signature in vivid detail. My pulse quickened, telling me this wasn't just a coincidence, it was a thread pulling tighter. Still, I couldn't accuse her outright, not yet, not without more proof. The history between us was too deep, too tangled with shared secrets and late-night confessions. So I forced a steadier voice, even as my heart raced. "Okay, Maddie. But please, if you hear anything, tell me right away." She exhaled through a laugh, light and dismissive. "Of course. You know I'd never let anything ruin your big day. We're in this together, Em. The words should have soothed me, like a balm on raw nerves. Instead, they landed like stones in my gut, heavy and cold. When I hung up, Jake studied my face from across the room, his brows furrowed. "Well?" he asked, his voice gentle but probing. I shrugged, though my hands were still damp with sweat, leaving smudges on the phone screen. "She says the salon must have messed up, confused me with another bride or something." Saying it out loud, I realized how flimsy it sounded, how it didn't hold up against the evidence piling up in my mind. My best friend, the one person I was supposed to trust without question, suddenly felt like the only one who could have walked away with my dress, her motives hidden behind that perfect smile. I stood by the window long after the call ended, watching the street outside where kids paddled their bikes in lazy circles and sprinklers clicked rhythmically across green lawns, misting the air with rainbows. Normal life moving forward without a hitch, while mine tilted sideways on its axis. If it was Maddie, if she'd really done this, what did that mean for everything between us? The sleepovers, the road trips, the promises we'd made under starry skies to always have each other's backs. The thought pressed hard on my chest, squeezing the air out, but another, darker one pressed even harder. If it was her, she wasn't just covering up a simple mistake. She was lying to me, straight to my face, and that betrayal cut deeper than any missing dress ever could. And then my phone buzzed again, another email from the salon, this time with the signed pickup slip attached. My thumb hovered over the notification, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. Whatever was waiting in that PDF, I knew it would either crush my doubts once and for all or confirm the one suspicion I was too afraid to name out loud. The PDF glowed on my phone screen, stark black letters against a blinding white background, like a clinical document delivering bad news. My order number at the top, the date stamped in bold, the release time glaring back at me. And then, the signature. Bold, curling strokes that almost mocked me with their confidence. The way the first letter of my surname arched exactly like the way I signed it on good days, but everything else was wrong, the strokes too heavy, the loops exaggerated into flourishes that screamed imitation. Whoever had done this knew my name intimately but not my hand, not the subtle way I dotted my I's or crossed my T's. My stomach twisted into knots, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. I called the salon again without hesitation, my voice tight and edged with desperation. "This isn't my signature at all. Can you tell me who picked it up? Please, I need details." The manager hesitated on the line, her breath audible as she weighed her words. Then she admitted, reluctantly, "The associate remembers it was a close friend of yours? A young woman. Brown hair, shoulder length, lively personality, very sure of herself. She even said, 'I'm the maid of honor, it's fine, Emily trusts me with everything.' Does that sound familiar to anyone?" My knees nearly buckled under me, the room spinning. That description fit Madison like a mirror image, her wavy brown hair she always complained about frizzing in humidity, her infectious energy that could light up a room or, apparently, con a salon clerk. For a few moments, I couldn't answer, just stared at the PDF on my phone while the words blurred through unshed tears. My mouth went dry as sandpaper. "That's impossible," I muttered, more to myself than to her. She would have told me if she'd done something like that. The manager sounded almost apologetic now, her voice softening. "I'm sorry, Miss Hartwell. The staff trusted her since she seemed so connected to you." She rattled off details like the exact fitting dates and even mentioned the blue stitch you requested. "We'll cooperate fully if you need us to provide the security footage." I thanked her mechanically, though my pulse thudded in my ears like war drums, drowning out everything else. I sat on the couch, the phone heavy in my hand like a lead weight. My thoughts tumbled over each other in a chaotic whirlwind, Madison insisting she'd handle every vendor call, Madison brushing me off so casually earlier, Madison always inserting herself into decisions until my wedding barely felt like mine anymore. It was like she was the director, and I was just playing the role of bride. And now this? My best friend, stealing my gown? No. It couldn't be. She'd been at every fitting with me, snapping photos on her phone, tearing up when I'd first tried it on and twirled in the mirror. Who does that if they're planning to betray you? It didn't add up, or maybe it added up too perfectly, revealing cracks I'd ignored for years. Jake walked in from the porch, holding 2 steaming mugs of tea he'd brewed to calm me down. He saw my face, the ashen pallor, the wide-eyed shock, and set them down quickly on the coffee table. "What is it now?" he asked, his voice laced with worry. I shoved the phone toward him wordlessly. "They said it was Maddie. They literally described her to a T. They even noted she called herself my maid of honor." He read the email slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to quiet anger. "So, she lied to you? Straight to your face on that call." His words made it real, heavier than my own swirling doubts ever could, like dropping an anchor into stormy seas. "I don't get it," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Why would she? What could she possibly gain from this? It's not like she can wear my dress, it was custom fitted to me." But even as I said it, images flickered unbidden in my mind, Madison twirling in boutique mirrors during our shopping trips, sighing dramatically about her mounting debts she never quite admitted the full extent of, always craving the spotlight in our group photos, positioning herself front and center. She loved drama, adored control, thrived on being the one everyone turned to. Was this just another performance in her endless show? Or something uglier, born from desperation I hadn't seen coming? My chest felt tight, like a band was squeezing it relentlessly. I wanted to call her back right then, demand the truth, scream until she cracked and confessed everything. But a part of me still clung desperately to the history between us, the girl who had promised me over ice cream cones that we'd be each other's forever people, who cried with me over college rejection letters in a shared dorm room, who said she couldn't wait to see me walk down the aisle in all my glory. That girl wouldn't steal from me. Would she? The doubt gnawed at me, a persistent ache. I pressed my forehead into my palms, the room too quiet now, the kind of silence that makes your own heartbeat sound like an accusation echoing off the walls. A small voice inside whispered the thing I didn't want to believe: it wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, calculated. And if that was true, then the person I trusted most in the world had just crossed a line I didn't know could be crossed, shattering the foundation of our friendship into irreparable pieces. Before I could decide whether to call Madison back or drive straight to her apartment and confront her face to face, my phone buzzed again with a notification. It was from the bridal resale site I'd been browsing last week for inspiration on veils and accessories, new listings in your area. I almost swiped it away dismissively, but then a familiar shade of silk in the thumbnail froze me mid-motion, my blood turning to ice. It looked exactly like my gown, the intricate embroidery, the subtle sheen. My heart plummeted into my stomach. I stared at the thumbnail until my vision swam with spots, the image burning into my retinas. The listing title was bland and generic, ivory designer bridal gown, never worn, but the photo was unmistakable. The delicate embroidery along the bodice that I'd chosen after hours of debate, the faint glint of that hidden blue stitch sewn into the hem, a personal touch only I and the seamstress knew about for good luck. My hands trembled as I clicked it open, zooming in on every detail. "No," I whispered, shaking my head in denial. She wouldn't, she couldn't have. Before the panic could crush me entirely, swallowing me whole, I hit call on Madison's contact one more time. She picked up on the second ring, her voice airy and bright as if nothing had happened. Again? You're going to give yourself wrinkles worrying like this." I forced my words through my tightening throat, each one a struggle. "Maddie, did you pick up my dress? Be honest." Silence blanketed the line. Then a dramatic gasp, theatrical and overdone. "What? Of course not. Why would you even think that? Babe, the salon must have totally botched something, mixed up orders or something ridiculous. They described you," I shot back, my voice cracking like glass under pressure. "Brown hair, shoulder length, said you were my maid of honor. They were sure it was you." Her laughter rang sharp in my ear, like shards of broken glass tinkling. "Oh, people misremember things all the time. You know how scatterbrained those clerks can be, always rushing from one bride to the next. Honestly, I bet they confused me with someone else from one of our fittings. I'll swing by there tomorrow and clear it up for you. I clenched my fist around the phone, nails digging into my palm. So you didn't touch it? You didn't sign anything? Swear to me. My question hung heavy in the air, and she cut me off with a breezy deflection. Listen, what matters is your day goes perfectly. And, honestly, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. That dress was a little safe, don't you think? Too traditional. There are more fashionable options out there. I've seen some incredible pieces online, super chic, with that modern edge you deserve. Her tone made me feel like I was the guest at my own wedding, not the bride, like my choices were up for debate, and she was the ultimate judge. You don't get to decide that, I snapped before I could stop myself, the words bursting out hot and unfiltered. It was my dress. I loved it, the way it made me feel, the memories tied to choosing it. On the other end, a pause stretched, then a sigh dripping with patronizing patience, like she was talking to a child. Calm down. Stress isn't a good look on anyone, especially a bride. Trust me, you'll thank me later when you're in something unforgettable, something that turns heads. I felt my cheeks burn with a mix of anger and humiliation. This wasn't the Maddie who had cried happy tears with me at fittings, hugging me tight and whispering how beautiful I looked. This was someone rewriting the narrative, gaslighting me until I questioned my own memory, my own sanity. She wanted me to believe the salon was wrong, that my choice was wrong, that she was the one holding the reins on my happiness. But all I felt was a chasm opening wide where our friendship used to be, a void filled with doubt and hurt. Jake stepped into the kitchen just then, catching the tail end of my heated words, and mouthed silently, "Is it her?" I turned away slightly, whispering so quietly into the phone that I wasn't sure Maddie even heard, "Why are you doing this to me? After everything we've been through?" Her voice came back, sweet and poisonous, laced with false innocence. "Doing what? Being your best friend? Looking out for you like I always have?" I hung up before I could hear another word, the click of the call ending echoing in my ears. My chest heaved with ragged breaths, and the room tilted around me like a ship in rough waters. The notification from the resale site still glowed on my screen like an unblinking eye, accusing and relentless. If Madison was lying, and every bone in my body screamed that she was, the truth wasn't just in her voice or her deflections. It was somewhere out there, tagged with a price, waiting to be uncovered. That night, sleep wouldn't come no matter how I tossed and turned. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that listing, the satin drape catching the light, the tiny blue stitch winking like a secret whisper only meant for me. My secret. No one else knew about it except me and Grace Kim, the talented seamstress who'd sewn it in after I'd nervously joked during a fitting that I needed something blue woven right into the dress for luck, a nod to the old tradition. My phone lay on the pillow beside me, the screen dimming and waking as I refreshed the bridal resale app again and again, hoping against hope that it would vanish, that it had all been a hallucination born from stress. It didn't disappear. The seller had even set a meetup location 2 towns over, in a neutral coffee shop parking lot. My dress wasn't missing anymore. It was for sale, commodified like any old garment. In desperation, I scrolled through every thread of connection I had to Madison, searching for a clue, a hint of motive. Old texts from our college days, Venmo requests for split dinners and concert tickets, photos from girls' trips where we posed arm in arm. That's when a name popped into my mind like a forgotten key, Tyler Grant, her ex-boyfriend from a couple years back. We hadn't spoken in ages, not since their messy breakup over his suspicions of her spending habits, but he'd been around long enough to know her patterns, her tells. At midnight, I swallowed my pride and typed a message, "Hey Tyler, weird question after all this time, have you heard from Maddie lately?" His reply came fast, almost too fast, like he'd been waiting for someone, anyone, to ask and lift the weight off his chest. Not directly. Why? Is she still pretending everything's fine? My chest tightened, a vice grip. What do you mean? I shot back, my fingers flying. He wrote back quickly, she owes people money, a lot. Credit cards maxed out, some shady loan stuff from those quick cash apps. Last time we talked a few months ago, she said she'd figure it out by flipping some expensive things she could get her hands on. Why? What's going on? The words burned into me like acid, flipping some expensive things. I didn't need him to spell it out further, the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. It wasn't a mistake, or a mix-up, or an overeager bridesmaid trying to help in her twisted way. Madison had stolen my dress deliberately, planning to sell it off quick to dig herself out of the financial hole she'd buried herself in, debts she'd hidden from everyone, including me. I dropped the phone onto the couch cushion with a soft thud and pressed my hands over my face, trying to block out the world. Anger, betrayal, disbelief, they crashed together in waves until my body shook with silent sobs. This wasn't a forgotten sash or a scheduling slip-up we could laugh off. This was my best friend robbing me blind days before the biggest moment of my life, turning our bond into a transaction. Jake came into the living room quietly, drawn by the sound of my muffled cries, and sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders without a word. I didn't even have to explain, he saw the screen, saw Tyler's messages illuminating the dark room, and exhaled through his teeth in a sharp hiss. So it's true, he said, his voice quiet but edged with fury. She did this to you. To us. Tears spilled hot down my cheeks, tracing salty paths, but behind them something shifted, a click, like a lock turning from fear to resolve. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid or overreacting. The truth was ugly, raw, and painful, but it was solid ground I could stand on. Madison had crossed a line, and now I had a choice: let her ruin me completely, let her shadow eclipse my joy, or find another way to stand tall on my wedding day, reclaiming what was mine. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and whispered into the silence of the room, my voice steadier than I felt, she won't take this from me. Not everything. And in that moment, a memory surfaced like a lifeline, my grandmother's wedding gown, carefully packed away in my aunt's cedar chest upstairs in her attic, preserved with love for decades. A vintage piece from the 1950s, with hand-stitched lace and a timeless silhouette. It was a backup I never thought I'd need, mentioned in passing during family stories, but now it felt like destiny calling. I called Aunt Linda before the sun even crested the horizon, the sky still inky black outside. My voice cracked as soon as she answered, sleep thick in her hello, but she didn't ask questions or probe, she just said, "Come over right now, honey. I'm putting on the coffee." When I arrived at her cozy house, the porch light welcoming, she led me straight to the spare room where the cedar chest sat like a treasure trove. The lid creaked open with a sigh, releasing a faint smell of lavender sachets and the gentle patina of age. Inside lay my grandmother's wedding dress, carefully folded in tissue paper, the ivory silk softened by time but still intact, radiant in its simplicity. I ran my fingers over the lace sleeves, tracing the delicate beadwork my grandmother had stitched by hand during late nights, a labor of love for her own special day. My throat tightened with emotion. Do you think it could work? With some alterations? Aunt Linda cupped my shoulders warmly, her eyes misty with memories. Honey, your grandma always wanted you to have this as an option, she used to say it carried good luck from our family line. She'd be so proud to see you in it. My tears blurred the satin until it looked like rippling water under light. For the first time since the dress disappeared, I felt something other than raw panic. I felt tethered to something bigger, roots, resilience, the women who came before me. I texted Grace Kim, my seamstress, begging her to meet me despite the early hour. She showed up at Aunt Linda's house in sweatpants and a hoodie, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her toolbox slung over her shoulder like a warrior's kit. When I slipped into the dress, it hung loose in places from years of storage, snug in others where styles had changed, but Grace circled me with sharp, appraising eyes and steady hands, pinning here and tucking there. Give me a night, she murmured, her voice calm and assured, pinning the hem with practiced speed. I'll tighten the corset for that perfect fit, freshen the seams to make them seamless, lift the sleeves just a touch for modernity. You'll look radiant, Emily, like it was always meant for you. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, not the sleek, modern bride I'd envisioned in glossy magazines, but something softer, more rooted in history, with a vintage charm that whispered of enduring love. I looked like a story unfolding, not a fleeting trend. My chest swelled with gratitude and grief all at once, a bittersweet cocktail. "Grace, I can't thank you enough for this, for dropping everything," I whispered, my voice thick. She smiled warmly, tucking a stray pin between her lips as she worked. "You'll walk down that aisle with your head high. I promise you that." By midnight, Aunt Linda's kitchen table was transformed into a makeshift atelier, covered in fabric scraps, chalk markings, and spools of thread. Grace finally packed her kit with a satisfied nod, hugging me tight before she left. "Get some rest now. Tomorrow, you'll feel stronger than ever." But I didn't sleep a wink. I sat cross-legged on Aunt Linda's plush carpet, smoothing the skirt over my lap gently, feeling the texture under my fingers. My grandmother's laughter echoed in my memory, the way she used to say during family gatherings, "Nothing borrowed matters more than courage, dear. Wear it like armor." When dawn broke, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, I carried the dress home with both arms wrapped around it protectively, like cradling something fragile but fierce. Jake met me at the door, his eyes softening with relief when he saw the garment bag, the faint scent of lavender clinging to it. "Plan B?" he asked gently, pulling me into a hug. I nodded, managing a shaky smile through the exhaustion. "Plan B. And it feels right." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of genuine relief warming me from within. Maddie had taken my dream dress, yes, but she hadn't stolen the moment itself, the vows, the love, the future. I had a gown now, I had Jake's unwavering support, I had family rallying around me like a fortress. But as I hung the dress in the closet, carefully zipping the bag, I knew the reprieve wouldn't last forever. If Madison thought she still had power over me, if she believed she could twist the narrative one more time, she'd find another way to remind me of her presence, to insert herself back into the spotlight. And sure enough, the very next evening, as the sun dipped low and cast long shadows, she made her move, bolder and more audacious than I could have imagined. The rehearsal dinner should have been a night of light-hearted laughter and butterflies in the stomach nerves, the kind of organized chaos you look back on fondly in photo albums, toasting to the adventure ahead. Instead, the air in the private dining room thickened with tension the moment Madison walked in, her heels clicking authoritatively on the hardwood floor. My fork froze halfway to my mouth, hovering over a bite of salad. Conversations faltered around the long, candlelit table as she swept into the room wearing my dress. My original gown, fitted snugly to her frame as if it had been tailored for her all along. The ivory fabric shimmered under the dim chandelier lights, the lace catching every pair of eyes like a magnet. I couldn't breathe, my lungs seizing up. Jake's hand slid over mine beneath the table, squeezing so tight it bordered on pain, grounding me. "She didn't," he muttered under his breath, his jaw clenched. But she had. Madison twirled once dramatically, forcing the fabric to ripple and flow like she was showing off a prize in a pageant. "Surprise," she announced to the room, smiling directly at me as if we were co-conspirators in some grand joke. "I wanted to prove your dress is safe and sound. See? Perfectly fine, no harm done." Every guest stared between us, murmurs rising like a tide, shocked whispers, wide eyes. My mother's mouth dropped open in disbelief. Aunt Linda whispered a rare curse under her breath, her hand clutching her napkin. I managed to push back my chair, the scrape loud and jarring against the floor, echoing in the sudden hush. "Why are you wearing it, Maddie?" My voice was sharp, trembling with barely contained fury. She feigned innocence perfectly, tilting her head with a practiced pout. "I thought it'd calm your nerves, Em. You've been stressing yourself sick over this mix-up. I figured if everyone saw it still here, intact and beautiful, no harm done." Besides, she smoothed her hands down the bodice possessively, admiring herself, "Doesn't it look incredible? I wanted you to see how it moves in real light, how it catches the eye." Anger surged hot in my chest, colliding with a deep wave of humiliation that made my skin flush. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a well-intentioned gesture gone wrong. This was theater, a public performance where I was cast as the unwitting punchline, diminished in front of my loved ones. I swallowed hard, tasting metal on my tongue. Take it off. Now. The room went quiet enough to hear the clink of ice settling in glasses, the distant hum of the restaurant kitchen. Madison laughed lightly, as though I'd told a mildly amusing joke. Relax, it's just for tonight. I'll bring it back tomorrow, fresh and ready. Don't be so dramatic, Em, it's not like I'm keeping it. Jake stood then, his chair scraping back hard enough to make heads turn. She's not being dramatic. You're out of line, Madison, way out. His voice cut through the whispers like a blade, steel beneath the calm. Madison's smile faltered for the first time, a crack in her facade. She opened her mouth to argue, to spin another web of words, but I lifted my chin, forcing a steadiness I didn't fully feel yet. You're done, Maddie. You're no longer my maid of honor, or part of this wedding at all. Gasps rippled through the table, a collective intake of breath. Her eyes widened in genuine shock, but before she could spit back a retort or plead her case, I turned toward my sister, who sat stunned nearby. Lauren, I said, my voice thick but firm with resolve. Will you stand beside me tomorrow? Be my rock up there? Lauren blinked in shock, then nodded fiercely, tears brimming in her eyes as she reached for my hand. Of course I will, Em. I'd be honored. The tension in the room shifted palpably then, like a tide turning. Guests leaned toward Lauren with supportive murmurs and nods, offering smiles and quiet words of encouragement, while Madison stood frozen in my stolen gown, her stage suddenly collapsing beneath her. She looked smaller somehow, her bravado cracking at the edges, revealing the vulnerability, or perhaps the desperation, underneath. I sat back down slowly, my hands trembling but steady enough to hold Jake's again under the table. I had taken something back, my power, my day, my right to choose who stood by me. But deep down, in the pit of my stomach, I knew Madison wasn't finished. She wouldn't just vanish quietly into the night, tail between her legs. If she wanted a war, if she craved that final spotlight, I would have to be ready for whatever came next. That night, I didn't sleep a single minute. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw Madison twirling in my gown at the rehearsal, her grin daring me to stop her, challenging the room to side with her charm. By dawn, as the first light filtered through the curtains, I knew, if she tried to pull something at the wedding itself, I couldn't just hope it wouldn't happen or rely on luck. I had to make sure, to build defenses that couldn't be breached. I called Sarah Bennett, our venue coordinator, first thing, my hands still shaky as I dialed. I laid everything out in a rush, the forged signature at the salon, the resale listing with my dress glaring back at me, the rehearsal dinner spectacle that had left everyone reeling. For a long moment, she was quiet on the line, absorbing it all. Then she said firmly, her voice like a steady anchor, Emily, don't worry another second. We'll keep her away from your day entirely. But to be thorough, we'll need proof in case she tries to play the victim card or cause a scene. Proof. That word lit a fire in me. That was where Grace came in again, my seamstress savior. At her little studio downtown, surrounded by bolts of fabric and humming sewing machines, she pulled out the altered gown, the original one Madison had taken, and flipped back the lining with expert fingers. See this? She pointed to the tiny monogram she'd stitched into the seam, my initials barely visible, hidden like a secret code. No one could fake this unless they knew exactly where to look and how I sign my work. It's unique to you. She snapped a photo on her phone and sent it straight to mine, the flash capturing every detail. We layered that with screenshots of the resale listing, complete with timestamps and the hidden blue stitch visible in the photos, plus the salon's signed release form with its damning description. Each piece of evidence felt like a brick in a wall I was finally building between myself and Madison, strong and unyielding. By afternoon, Sarah and I sat in the reception hall of the venue, the space still empty but buzzing with potential, sketching out a plan on her clipboard. The staff and security team will be fully briefed, she said, ticking notes off with precise checks. Photos of Madison distributed, instructions clear, she won't set foot inside without us knowing and intervening immediately. And your photographers agreed to document everything discreetly if she shows up. We'll have a full record, timestamps and all, in case things escalate. I nodded, my hands finally still on the table, no longer fidgeting. For the first time in days, I felt control slipping back into my grip, like reclaiming the steering wheel after a skid. Jake joined us halfway through the meeting, sliding into a chair beside me. He listened intently, his jaw tight with protective anger, then looked at me with quiet pride shining in his eyes. "You're fighting back," he said softly, kissing my temple. "And you're winning." His steadiness felt like armor, wrapping around me. That evening, as I zipped my grandmother's gown back into its protective garment bag, the fabric whispering softly, I whispered to myself in the mirror, "She's not going to take this from me. Not anymore." The satin gleamed under the lamp, like it was listening, like it knew the battles it had seen before. But even with the plan in place, dread curled in my chest like smoke. Madison had already crossed lines I never thought she'd touch: forgery, theft, public humiliation. And I knew her well enough, from years of shared secrets and inside jokes, to know she wouldn't give up her role as the center of attention without one last, desperate attempt to steal the show. As the sun set, painting the room in deep orange hues that danced across the walls, I stood by the window and promised myself aloud, if she came for me tomorrow, I'd be ready. This time, I wouldn't be the one caught off guard. This time, the story would end on my terms. The morning of the wedding, I woke before dawn, the world outside still wrapped in hushed darkness. For a few precious moments, lying there in the quiet, I almost convinced myself the nightmare had passed, dissolved like mist in the light. But as I slipped into my grandmother's gown, now fitted perfectly thanks to Grace's magic touch, I felt something stronger than the usual bridal nerves: defiance, burning bright. The lace hugged me like a shield, the hem whispering across the floor with every step, a soft susurrus of encouragement. This wasn't the dress I had planned in my Pinterest boards, sleek and contemporary, but it carried a story deeper than any trend: generations of love, resilience, quiet strength. It carried me. At the venue, the air buzzed with the scent of fresh flowers, peonies and roses in soft pinks, and the gentle strings of music from the quartet warming up. Guests filled the seats row by row, their chatter a comforting hum, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself smile genuinely, feeling the joy seep back in. But then, near the entrance where sunlight streamed through arched doors, a ripple of commotion broke the rhythm, like a stone dropped in still water. I didn't even need to look to know. It was Madison. She had the original gown on again, dragging it behind her like a trophy won in battle, her face set in that practiced smirk that said she owned the room. She tried to stride past the ushers with her usual confidence, chin high, but Sarah was waiting, poised like a guardian. With a calm I'll never forget, professional, unyielding, Sarah blocked her way and pulled out the folder we'd prepared, thick with evidence. "Madison Reed, you are not permitted to enter this event," she said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, her voice carrying authority. Madison's smirk faltered, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Sarah flipped through the pages methodically, the salon's pickup slip with the forged signature circled in red, the hidden monogram photo from Grace proving authenticity, the screenshots of the resale listing with damning details like the blue stitch and the price tag. Guests leaned in curiously, whispers growing sharp and judgmental. Madison stammered, her voice pitching higher, "This is ridiculous, Emily asked me to hold on to it, but then a voice cut through the fray, deep and unexpected. Tyler, her ex, stepping forward from the back row where he'd been seated as a guest, invited by mutual friends, but now a key player. "Don't even try, Maddie. You told me you were selling it to pay off your debts. Don't lie to her face again, not after everything." The room went silent, a pin drop hush. Madison's mask shattered completely, her eyes darting wildly, searching for an ally in the crowd, a sympathetic face to latch onto. There were none, only averted gazes and murmurs of disapproval. Security moved forward gently but firmly, two uniformed guards guiding her out as she shouted my name, her voice cracking with a mix of rage and desperation, "You can't do this, we're best friends." The doors closed behind her with a final click. I stood at the edge of the aisle, heart pounding but head high, watching as the last thread between us snapped clean, irretrievably. And then the music swelled, violins and cellos weaving together in harmony. Everyone turned back toward me, toward the dress I did wear, the one carrying my grandmother's memory like a blessing. I stepped forward, one foot then the other, and the gasps I heard weren't for the drama anymore, they were for me. For us. For the bride who had risen above the storm. Jake waited at the altar, his eyes shining with unshed tears and unbreakable love. When I reached him, he took my hands in his, warm and sure, and whispered, "You're breathtaking. Stronger than anyone I know." My throat ached with emotion, but I managed to whisper back, "We made it. Together." As we spoke our vows, promising forever in words that felt etched into our souls, Madison's protests faded behind the venue walls, irrelevant now. The chaos, the betrayal, the humiliation, all of it dissolved like fog in sunlight as Jake slipped the ring on my finger, the cool metal a promise made real. The words bound us, not the gown, not the drama. And when the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," I exhaled for the first time in days, releasing the weight. The storm had tried to follow me down the aisle, raging and relentless, but it didn't win. I did. And as we kissed, surrounded by applause and love, the only thing I felt was freedom, pure, hard-won, and mine. The wedding ended in a blur of laughter that echoed through the reception hall, joyful dancing under twinkling lights, and a profound sense of relief that washed over me like a gentle wave. But the fallout came quietly in the days after, settling like dust after a tempest. The venue staff returned my stolen gown to me in a clear plastic bag, delivered to my porch with a note of apology. It was wrinkled from its misadventures, dotted with faint stains along the hem, grass perhaps, or spilled wine from Madison's defiant wear. I stared at it there on the steps, my heart oddly calm, no longer racing. Once, I would have cried over every crease, every imperfection marring my dream. Now, it looked like nothing more than fabric, stripped of the power it had held over me, reduced to threads and memories. Madison hadn't just ruined a dress, she'd ruined the illusion that she was my safe place, my confidant through thick and thin. 2 days later, I sat in a police station downtown, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, filing a report with trembling fingers that steadied as I spoke. The officer raised his brows when I explained the full saga, that my maid of honor, my supposed best friend, had forged my signature, attempted to sell the gown online, and paraded in it like a trophy. "Family friend?" he asked, pen hovering over his notepad. I hesitated, the word friend tasting bitter now, then shook my head firmly. "Not anymore. Not after this." Saying it aloud felt like cutting the last lingering tie, a final severance. Madison tried, of course, to claw her way back. She sent me a long, rambling message that popped up on my phone, paragraphs upon paragraphs of "I'm sorry," laced with excuses that rang hollow. She panicked about her debts piling up from bad investments and impulsive shopping. She thought I'd forgive her like I always had in the past for smaller slights. She only wore the dress at the rehearsal to prove it was safe and not stolen. I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply box, my fingers itching with all the things I could say, the hurt, the anger, the years of overlooked red flags like her borrowing money and forgetting to pay back, or her jealousy bubbling under compliments. Then I locked my phone screen and let the silence answer for me, a void more powerful than words. I blocked her everywhere after that, social media, phone, email. It wasn't fueled by rage anymore, not the burning kind. It was something cleaner, more deliberate, a choice to protect myself, to draw boundaries I should have set long ago. I'd lost a dress, yes, but I had gained clarity, sharp and unclouded. The people who stood by me when the storm hit hardest, Jake with his quiet strength, my sister Lauren stepping up without hesitation, Aunt Linda offering her home and heart, Grace with her late-night stitches, even Sarah at the venue with her professional resolve, they reminded me what real loyalty looks like, unwavering and true. In the quiet evenings after, as Jake and I settled into our new life, I caught myself replaying the moment I walked down the aisle in my grandmother's gown. Guests rising to their feet in waves, their gasps not for scandal or pity but for the sight of me reclaiming the day, radiant and unbroken. That dress, imperfect and aged with grace, had carried me through when everything else fell apart. In its stitches, I felt the weight of generations of women who had endured worse, heartbreaks, losses, betrayals, and still stood tall, still chose love. Now, when I pass the closet and see both dresses hanging side by side, the stolen one cleaned but forever tainted, and my grandmother's glowing with history, I don't feel bitterness twisting in my gut. I feel chosen, by love that endures, by family that rallies, by the version of myself that refused to crumble under the weight. Madison's shadow no longer lingers there, no longer haunts the corners. Only my own reflection does, stronger for the scars. And that's why I decided to share it all here, to lay it bare. Not for sympathy or validation, but because for days I questioned my sanity, wondered if I was overreacting to shadows, if maybe I was the problem for seeing malice in a friend who had been part of my life for so long. But telling this story, reliving it step by step, I realized something profound. I didn't lose my mind in the chaos. I chose myself, fiercely and without apology. And if choosing yourself means losing someone who was never really for you, who saw your joy as a threat or a resource, that isn't a tragedy at all. That's freedom, hard-earned and sweet.